Good afternoon, everyone. I am Andrew Lund, the Product Sales Manager for our cellular product line. Go ahead and please mute yourselves remote. We'll do questions at the end. You can also chat in questions as well as we go. Okay, so been with Advantech for about a year. Prior to that, I was with Digi. Some of you may know Digi, but definitely more of like a sales-oriented product manager. This product sales manager role is kind of like a product manager with a quota, which is kind of a cool thing. So you guys have known Advantech for a long time. Let me just give you just real briefly. So there's a little company back in the early 90s outside of Prague called Dongle that made radios and cell modems. They were acquired by B&B SmartWorks, used to be B&B Electronics. And then that whole fish, so to speak, was acquired by Advantech. So that's a little bit of where we come from. Yeah, you may, as you get to know us better, see some engineers and support people with a Eastern European accent, and that's why. Okay, so we'll cover about 4 of these high-level topics today. I am not going to get into, or anyway, not real into speeds and feeds and product-focused stuff, because that can get kind of boring, and frankly, you don't really know. I'd rather spend some time talking about why you should, kind of pay attention and hope to keep your interest with some real-world examples and talk about customers who are actually using this stuff. But first, let me do a little bit of kind of background on the technology landscape. So you guys, I love, this is used with permission by the way, but I love Delbert. We have some varying understandings of what exactly 4G means. It doesn't mean goodness. It means generation. But okay, so what? Where are we now? So back in the day, some of you will of course recall AT&T and T-Mobile were on. You used to always have to use a SIM card for their phones, right? They used the GSM standard, which is more common in Europe and outside of the U.S., frankly. And then Verizon, Sprint, U.S. Cellular used something else, basically CDMA that was started by Qualcomm. So this is just kind of a rundown of some of the acronyms and the standards and so forth. But just we used to have these 2 different standards prevalent in the U.S. Today, those have sort of combined, frankly, into LTE, long-term evolution. So you'll notice now, like if you have Verizon or Sprint, you have to have a SIM card. You didn't have to do that before, right? So this is just basic, kind of basic understanding of what LTE, what it means, at least insofar as it's a step forward and a new standard that the carriers are using. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about low power LTE options. It's important that you understand that I'll kind of use the phone as an analogy almost, okay? Because the products that we're going to be talking about today are basically the same fundamental technology as your phone. They're just optimized for machine communication, okay? But whereas our phones are designed to be really high speed, data-rich, interactive kind of networking technology behind it, machines don't need that high speed. So you see a reference to LTE-A here. I've seen some Verizon billboards that promote LTE-A. This is LTE Advanced. There are different categories of LTE. There's LTE Category 6, which is LTE-A. Category 4, which a lot of our phones are, 3, and so forth. It's also Category 1. So let me just sort of explain some of this. So if you think of the cellular carrier networks as think of it as like a highway, right? They buy or lease space on this highway from the FCC, right? And then they use it to make money. So our phones, our smart cars or whatever that are connected, they're right in the main center lane here, right? 3G, which is going away, and I'll talk about that, but mostly 4G and soon 5G. You'll also see reference occasionally to what people call machine-type communication or narrowband IoT, which is more common in Europe, LTE Cat-M, which has been rolled out here in the U.S. These use like the shoulder of the highway, okay? So they use parts of, they're sort of unused real estate, if you like, that the carriers are developing specifically for low data rate, low power communication. You may also see referenced in this space occasionally to LoRa or Sigfox. These are not part of the 3GPP, or they're not part of the like commercial international cellular like organization and organizing bodies. They're their own private private endeavors, private technology and private companies. Okay, so there's also, and now I think about it, I almost should have a picture here, like a signifier right in between these is something called LTE Category 1, and you'll see a reference to that in just a minute. So, okay, this is the only product slide I'm going to show. I'll show this slide twice, once more at the end, but the LTE product line from Advantech is extremely simple to understand. I've learned a little bit about the touch panel PCs and HMI and different switches and network control gear and all this automation stuff that Advantech sells, and that I think most of you are very familiar with. And it, to me, at least on the outside, it can be kind of confusing. There's like so many options. That's not the case with this stuff. Very simple. So Smart Start is the little sibling, about $300. LTE Category 1, which means it's kind of like 3G speeds, but with LTE longevity. In other words, it's going to be around for a long time. And the Smart Flex, this is the big sibling, has all the different switch options, GPS, PoE, USB, micro SD, and so forth. Now, both of these are fully certified to work on all the networks in North America, except for Sprint. Okay, Sprint's an outlier right now. That's important. And what's also important is that they'll work on them interchangeably. In other words, they're carrier agnostic. So think about you and your buddy are out fishing and you don't have very good reception on your Verizon phone, but your buddy does on AT&T. Wouldn't it be cool if you could just switch back and forth, right? Wouldn't it be cool if you could just switch your phone to AT&T and vice versa? So that's what these have. So you'll see 2 SIM slots there. You can put a SIM for Verizon and a SIM for AT&T, and it'll fail back and forth. Okay, so very this is, I'll have to see about that. First question you're going to get asked: which carriers do we support? Do you support Verizon? Do you support AT&T? Do you support Verizon's private network? This is an area of definite strength for the Advantech LTE product. We support all of them and a lot more. In fact, we're the strongest vendor in terms of supporting international networks as well. So this is very strong for us. So there's no issues when it comes to connecting to carriers, okay, except for Sprint. The other thing, again, I'm just kind of wrapping up some product stuff here, then we're going to talk about applications and identifying opportunities and so forth, okay? But I think this could be helpful because many of you are used to, at least with the Advantech product line, are used to selling like the industrial embedded PCs, right? And so you work with customers who are more likely to be developers, more likely to be, software engineers, that type of person. So the Advantech LTE product line is unique in this, that it's not just it is a router first, but it's also an IoT gateway. So it's ARM-based, it's got dedicated storage, it's got SDK support, it's an open Python device. Contrast that with devices from like Digi or which is a proprietary OS, but then also, other competitors have just like a closed OS. So this is an important point. Support all the carriers, customizable, right? So when a customer says, hey, can I put, I have some Python code I want to put on your device, can I do that? The answer is yes. Okay. All right. Okay, let's get into some, so that was all the product stuff, guys. So that only took, what, 10 minutes? Not even that. Yeah, I guess 10 minutes. Okay, so the rest of the time we're going to spend talking about sales opportunities, okay? And I was looking through some of your websites just in preparation to kind of understand where you guys might be coming from. A lot of you are, deal with industrial, like wired networking or automation type of applications, and some energy, I saw some energy business in there too. So I'm going to kind of tailor this to that. But At the same time, I want to do this thing where we look at common elements of opportunities, so that irrespective of the vertical that you serve or the application that you're looking at, you can look at an opportunity and decide, okay, this might be a good fit for LTE. Okay, so we'll talk about the opportunity, the patterns, and what that means. Okay, and then we'll talk about the competitive products to look for too for replacement opportunity. All right. So there's 4 key elements here. Not all 4 are required, but all 4 certainly make a stronger, probably have a stronger business case. So when you have a customer who builds expensive specialized equipment that goes on third-party sites where there's limited or non-existent internet access, and they want to talk to their distributed equipment from a central software application, you might have an opportunity. Okay. So let's break each one of these down here. So I'm going to use these 4 examples of real customers, and I'm going to populate, I'm going to kind of show examples of how each one of these can fits those 4 pattern criteria. So expensive specialized equipment. So left to right. So Bausch and Lomb, eye surgery equipment, eye care equipment. That's a big, expensive eye surgery pedestal. Okay. That's expensive and specialized, right? Olia kiosks, expensive and specialized equipment. This is a vending machine. This is like an air, it's actually nitrogen vending for people who want to fill up their cars with nitrogen, or their tires with nitrogen. Expensive, specialized. This is a snow melting trailer. They make them that aren't mobile, but a giant commercial snow melting device that uses embedded PCs and HMIs, by the way, as do all of these. Okay, it's expensive, it's specialized equipment that goes on a third-party site. Okay, in the case of Bausch & Lomb, it's an operating room. It could be an airport terminal, a gas station. Think about a commercial parking lot. It's not a company-owned site, right? There's limited or non-existent WAN access. So, for example, you can't just get on the hospital Wi-Fi, right? That's not going to be a permanent solution. You're not going to really use the Boingo hotspot, at the airport terminal. You're not going to bring a landline in. It's very hard to get commercial, permanent internet access in an airport, let's say. And again, for these 2, look, you're in a parking lot, there's no readily available internet connection. By the way, another good example that some of you might find is from your day-to-day life is next time you're in a production floor or a substation or a compression facility for a natural gas line, let's say, or any kind of industrial facility. Think about when you walk by, like, they make those vending machines, Grainger and Fastenal make those vending machines for like hand sanitizer and Gojo and paper, rags and things like that for like in the break room of an industrial facility. Those are all connected over cellular, right? Then look out on the factory floor. All the equipment, if someone wants to monitor that remotely, they need internet access, and they're probably not getting it from the factory operator itself. But I'll get there in a second. Get ahead of myself. Sorry, guys. Okay, so and then finally the 4th app. So it's expensive, it's specialized, it's on third-party sites. They don't have readily available internet access, but they want to connect to that machine in order to monitor it. They have a cloud application, let's say, that wants to talk to it. So in the case of Bausch & Lomb, they have a way for their surgeons to connect to the equipment and set their own profiles for sensitivity of touch panel and things like that. If you had a kiosk, you would want it for content, transactions, and so forth. If this is fundamentally a SCADA application in the case of the nitrogen station, and then looking at fuel level, runtime, things like that for the snow melter. Okay, so the 4 characteristics that I just walked through are important, but I can just kind of anticipate people saying, well, yeah, but come on, man. We've been selling this stuff for a while, and people just connect over Wi-Fi. So, what's the big deal? Let's talk about that for a second. So, you would have thought about this on number 3, right? Limited or non-existent Wi-Fi access, internet access. So in at least these cases, there is, so take the first 2, for example. Well, there is Wi-Fi, right? There is internet there. It's just really hard to get. It changes, you don't own it, and so it's hard to build a commercial, like a business reliable connection there. How many of you remember, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I don't really remember the timing, this thing with Target that happened, right? Remember Target, the big Target breach? I'm based up here in Minneapolis. This is a big deal locally. This happened, you guys will remember, when a contractor, basically Target hired a contractor to do some building energy monitoring for them. That contractor was given access to some elements of Target's store network. And from there, a hacker was able to gain access and kind of worm their way into the payment network and wreak absolute havoc, okay? So it's not uncommon at all for me to hear, well, you know, we can't let, or we can't get on customers' networks because they're worried that they'll have a Target breach, okay? Like, it's a very clear thing. And then reliability, right? So imagine you guys are, you know, salespeople. Imagine you're hosting a call for a massive deal and you're in an airport terminal. Are you going to get on the free Wi-Fi? Probably not, right? You might hotspot from your phone. You might just do it from your hotel room. So security and reliability are super important, right? And that's not necessarily the case with Wi-Fi. You will see people who have like a little USB dongle attached. That's a fine idea for connecting, you know, a laptop. That's what it was designed for, right? Connect a laptop to the internet. The laptop has a person there. The person can plug and unplug the USB dongle. The person can manipulate settings and so forth very easily. But those were not designed to connect machines to the internet where there's no one around, okay? They're not manageable. You can't put any code on it. They're like higher likelihood that they'll just walk away in somebody's pocket, right? And they're tied to a single carrier. Remember I mentioned earlier that carrier agility capability? So we have sold this year, I would say 2,000 or 3,000 devices just replacing LTE USB dongles, right? Not a great solution. There are, oops, sorry guys. Okay, so then there are, here we go. So then there are quote unquote pre-certified LTE modules out there. This is, let me just back up. We're basically talking about the build versus buy trade-off here, right? And you guys know this, you deal with engineers, you sell to engineers. A lot of times they would just rather build things themselves, right? Why buy something from Advantech, a distributor, when I could just, you know, build my own little thing out of a Raspberry Pi or something, right? There's a few reasons for that with cellular. So an embedded LTE module makes a lot of sense when something needs to be small. You need to sell a ton of them each year. It's going to be sold in a single region. It can take time to get to market, and you have a ton of support, engineers and software people who understand LTE. If that's the case, if you're dealing with a customer like that, hey, great. I can definitely make some recommendations and happy to help you know, them go down the path of building an embedded solution. No problem there. But it's challenging, right? And so then you do have people who just want to build their own thing. I bet you some of you have, maybe you have colleagues who remind you of this guy, or maybe customers too, right? But some people just don't want to, in spite of the fact that it probably doesn't make business sense, they don't want to listen to you and just buy a pre-certified device. I'll just show a slide. So I'm happy to make this available later. It takes a lot of time and money. There's money built in here, right? Because you're paying engineers to do this, to go through carrier certifications. And you're almost always going to fail. And getting back in line takes time, and it's difficult if you don't have a lot of volume, you know, to make a business case for yourself with the carriers. So it takes a lot of time. Even if you're using some kind of certified module, you have to do specific software engineering to go through to go through certifications at the end of the day. So look, this stuff, I'm getting too far down in the weeds, guys, but let me just say that the point I'm trying to make on this case is, if you're dealing with a customer who is making a build versus buy decision for LTE, there are very strong reasons for them to think about buying rather than building, at least to get started with. Okay, and I'm happy to help articulate that in more detail. But that's I think that's kind of where I'd wanted to start. I forgot to say, by the way, we'll try not to take up the whole hour here. In fact, I'm certain that we won't. Leave time for questions. If you're like me, you kind of start to fade off after about half an hour anyway. So hopefully you're all still paying attention though. Okay, so we talked about LTE network background, right? The technology context, the different Gs, low power, new low power technology coming out. I showed you a slide about the product, talked about the carriers that we support. We talked about the different pattern or 4 characteristics of the ideal LTE opportunity. Talked about the build versus buy decisions. Now let's talk about what it's like to kind of engage with a customer who's doing this. Let me just say at the beginning of this section, your customers need to hear about this. They actually do. I know that there are different companies out there who make. Oh, awesome! Good question. Okay, Scott, I see that question. Let's get back to that. Well, actually, okay, Horizon Windows security. So this ties in. Okay, so Scott's question here. Hopefully you can see. So what are the security best practices for implementing these devices? So good question. These are network appliances, right? So they have their full, they can terminate and initiate VPN. So there's VPN considerations, certainly locking down the firewall to any kind of outside traffic. Actually, the security best practices in some ways start with your SIM and your data plan setup, right? So you can get a private static IP address from Verizon and AT&T, for example. That's a great way to start off on the right foot security-wise. So let's just say the 3 steps are setting up the plan the right way with a data plan from the carrier that fits your need. Changing the friggin' password on the device, frankly, that's required. And doing, that kind of basic setup, and then organizing your VPN, either creating a VPN, firewall that blocks outside traffic, so you don't get, data hacking kind of pings from the Chinese and Russians. And then thinking about network segmentation, right? So those are maybe the first 3 things that I would think of around security. But feel free to just chime back in with other questions, or further questions on that topic. Okay, so customers want to talk about this stuff, and they either know that they need to, or they don't know that they need to yet, but they will soon. Okay, so. Remember how I said earlier that, say, whereas for the last 20 or 30 years, maybe you've been selling a smart device that meets most of the criteria that I listed above, but when it needed to get to the internet access, somebody on the factory floor just gave the customer Wi-Fi access. That is going away, frankly. I mean, it just absolutely is. There's also this notion of this cloud software applications that companies are developing for differentiation and additional revenue, right? So, for example, I was at a company that makes commercial restaurant oven vents. Okay, I mean a lot of sheet metal bending, but there's a lot of smarts built into fire suppression and things like that. They're developing a remote cloud application to do more things, more building energy monitoring things, right? That's a great example of cloud connected services. I'll talk about this in a second. 2G has gone away, 3G is on the horizon, and these copper, just call them landlines, are not cheap to maintain or to pay for it monthly. So customers need to talk about this to us. LTE is a great door opener. We've definitely seen that over the last year or 2. Okay, so I said goodbye to 2G, 3G cellular networks. So we haven't been able to certify a new 3G device, 3G only device for at least a couple years. Okay, so that started a couple years ago. They're not. You're not going to be able to activate a new 3G device here in about a month and a half, 5 weeks. AT&T follows that 6 months later. End of next year, the EVDO network goes away. And by the way, when this network goes away, that also means that Sprint can't roam on Verizon 3G anymore, right? AT&T, maybe it lasts until 2021 with 3G, but then with LTE, your runway is a lot longer. So these networks are going away, and LTE is here to stay. Okay, so just keep that in mind for people who have devices in the field already. Speaking of customers who have devices in the field already, I think it can be kind of helpful to just say, look, customers are going to fall into one or two categories. Either they don't use LTE yet today, in which case you refer to the above slides, right? The product, the pain points, and so forth. Or they do use LTE today, and in many cases, it's going to be from one of these guys. If you see this, call, maybe not me, I'm happy to help you, but start with your Advantech channel rep. But, this is like low-hanging fruit here, because we have a compelling story to tell vis-a-vis all of these companies, and there's maybe a half a dozen more out there that you'll see. But definitely, if we have a competitive situation, we can play. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more slides, and then we'll open it up to some questions here. So I kind of developed this idea that let's just say you cold call somebody, or you look up somebody on LinkedIn or whatever, and you're trying to get a feel for, okay, I think they might need this, but where do I start? Probably you're talking to one of two kinds of people, right? Either it's a networking person, or it's an engineer, developer type person. Okay, so the networking person is, hey, I build networks. I'm a Cisco dude or dudette, right? I have network in my title. I care about the routing protocols and the VPN and the firewall. And so you can emphasize those things, right? You can emphasize our enterprise routing and security. You can emphasize the fact that we're a network appliance, right? That's what we do. If you're dealing with an engineer, developer type person, they think about, okay, I build things, right? So, and this mindset, right? I'm building this product. They think about things in terms of Linux and Python and just code, right? Their titles are like engineer, developer, software, etc., right? They care about the software development piece, Linux kernel, things like that, right? Okay, cool. We have a story to tell there, right? You can then articulate things like, yeah, it's an open Linux device, SDK for, Python, Azure, all kinds of different stuff. But at the end of the day, I would suggest that if you don't know, you don't know where to start, right? You could really do a lot worse than just asking, how do you connect to the internet, right? How do you connect this controller, this PLC, this HMI, this whatever it is, right? Meter. How do you connect it to the internet? Oh, well, we just use our customer's Wi-Fi. That's a good sign that you got somebody that's going to want to talk to you or will need to talk to you soon, right? So I just always encourage, like, that's just a great way to start, right? Okay, I'm happy to provide demo units. By the way, we've done this in several cases already, and seems pretty good success. We've got this stuff set aside. It's very, frankly, the way to speed up your time to close is to just do it like a setup call, a follow-up call. I mean, this is basic stuff. You guys know this. But I have seen that where someone who's starting out with LTE, and they'll have maybe 2 or 3 products to evaluate. The sooner we get in with a hands-on, like, getting started call, the more familiar and comfortable customers are with us, and we tend to, win over the competition then. Excuse me. Okay. So again, real simple product offering, okay? Smart Start and Smart Flex. Both have carrier agility across all the carriers you see on the bottom. Both have the same software tools that you see on the bottom. Smart Start is the little sibling, about 300 bucks down to, you know, maybe low 200s in very high volume. LTE Category 1, that's that slower, lower cost LTE. Smart Flex, higher ASP, more options, GPS included, USB, PoE, all that stuff. Okay. A great play here, by the way, when you have someone who has a switch built in already, or whose cabinet, let's say, or panel requires a switch, and they want to add LTE. They want to add LTE and replace the switch at the same time, right? 2 for 1. So that's the product lineup. Again, if you see one of these companies, man, we have an opportunity. We should talk. And that's it. That's all the content that I wanted to share. We got that one question, which is great. I'll hand it back to you for questions.
Yeah, hi. You want to chat questions or hear them in real time?
Real time, son.
So this is Nathan Smith, one of Advantech employees, sales guys. Can you talk a little bit about how the capability to program these things and how you might do that?
Sure. So, yeah, okay. So I need to make a distinction here because I want to make sure I set the expectation right. It's best to do development in a development environment, right? And I have to admit, I'm not a software developer, so I'm a little bit, you know, out of my element talking about the finer points of this. But you don't. Let's say you have some Linux. Okay, there's 2 ways actually. Let me be perfectly clear. So we have pre-published, we call them user modules that are basically like, it's like an app store, but for this equipment, right? You can do things like, let's say you want to create a captive Wi-Fi portal for the Wi-Fi. Okay, cool. We have a little user module for that. Let's say you want to do some legacy protocol conversion in a power substation to get to talk to a legacy serial device over IP. Okay, we have a pre-published user module for that. So there are I see that question. Thanks, Fred. I'll get to that. There are pre-published custom code that customers can use. They can also write their own. So for example, here's a great example. So the customer is using this for condition-based equipment monitoring, and they have some Python code that they want to be able to publish data to Microsoft's Azure cloud. Okay, cool. We have an SDK that customers can use that will load onto this device, put their Python code on the device, and then it lives there and then publishes it to the Azure cloud. So it's not like I don't want to give you the impression that these devices are full-fledged development environments, but they can accommodate and host both our own published code, you know, user modules, like I said, or customers like Linux, C, Python code. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. Yeah, sure.
All right, let's see a question here. Hold on. Okay, Fred. Yes, experience working with all of those. The Smart Flex is certain. So Fred's question was experience working with Canadian carriers. Smart Flex is officially like certified by Rogers, which means they'll sell it in their catalog and support it. These will work on any of those carriers. Canadian carriers don't have the same like certification requirements necessarily. So yeah, these will all work, and they're used quite often in Canada. Okay, Scott's got a good one here. Okay, so Scott was saying, hey, yeah, that's good. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen, but Scott had an example customer who says, yeah, the customer says something like, my manager wants to have all my machine data in the cloud, and he heard that all the cool guys are using Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Does this product help me do this? Yeah. And the answer is yes. So this is like just a gateway to Google, right? We have a lot of customers who have these devices publishing data up to their AWS server, Google, Microsoft Azure server. So yeah, this is totally like the path between your machine out there in the field and getting data right into Google. All it has to have is, you know, a serial interface or an Ethernet or Wi-Fi interface or I/O. Frankly, I mean, that's just an IP gateway. Yeah, good question though. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we got one here. Just a second from Brian. Yeah. Okay, Brian. Let me just pop that open for a second. If you're doing a SCADA setup, do you need one of the SmartFlex by the SCADA PC acting to access and then mark local? Let me read that one more time. No, you don't necessarily need that. No. So, well, okay. In the example that I gave earlier with that nitrogen, like car, inflation, basically a big nitrogen tank out there somewhere, and I said that was a SCADA example. They have a controller, like an IP-based controller, that we're just providing an internet access for that, right? So we're not necessarily doing control things. We're providing internet access to the controller, that does the control. In the example you have here, each RTU could be connected. I mean, if the RTUs are IP based, they can connect back to the SmartFlex by Ethernet, by serial. It doesn't really matter. Inside each of these things, remember my example. There's these are like our phones, right? So inside each of these is a cell radio module. That radio, connects this device to the nearest cell phone tower, right? Just like your phone connects to the nearest cell phone tower. So, I mean, there's no generic SCADA setup, I guess, but in general, it's important to think of this as just an IP gateway for any connected SCADA controller or RTU behind the SCADA controller. That's fundamentally how it would be used. Oh, yes, we do support MQTT. Yeah, so Brian also asked about MQTT. Soon we publish in MQTT, and the answer is yes. Yeah, specifically MQTT to AWS. Yeah, we do. And that's through a user module. I believe it actually might be in our web UI now. But anyway, the answer is yes. We do publish MQTT. That's a classic example.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Andrew, for presenting. This will be made available in the next newsletter. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.